Hurts lost it for Smith. It's a touchdown. Devontae Smith.
Bijan Robinson. Give him the ball. Touchdown, Texas. He's got room. Lamar Jackson. Open field. Inside the 20. He is in. Lamar. Spectacular.
Welcome to the Saturday Air Raid, part of NFL Lab Network. I'm your host, John Roberts, and with me today, as always, my two good friends, Dan O'Connell and Brad Bolt. How are we today? Good morning.
Yeah, it's the first time in a few weeks. All I've had going on in my head is that song from The Hangover, "We're the three best friends that." I've just had that back. I've just had that in my head since it's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the show together. So
it's good to get the. It's good to get the crew back together.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to apologise. That'll be the first and last time anyone ever hears me sing on a podcast. I'm sorry for that. Anyone who's listening.
No, because after the show, I'm going to add some auto-tune to it, so you'll sound beautiful. All right. This is the big one. This is the episode that I'm most excited about. This is what sort of gave me the idea to start the Saturday Air Raid, thinking about players for the long run, players who are going to make your fantasy teams good for years to come. And my favorite part is that we get to talk a bit of college football, which for us in Australia is good because it's kind of like our weekend sport when the NFL's on Mondays. So how does that sound? Is this sound all right?
Pumped for it, yeah. Been waiting for this.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was saying, this is the big one. So we're going to be talking about our favorite, I want to say 10 college quarterbacks. I'm not sure that it's going to be strictly 10. It'll definitely be more because we'll probably have some varying players as well. And then, like I'd said to you prior to the show, my 10 is sort of like actually like 7 players. So I've actually got 17. Having said that, I could have talked about 30. And that is for anyone. That's a good point for anyone listening to the show as well. If you don't hear your favorite player that we're talking about in this episode, I'm sure that they'll come up at some point. Time. But the point of this is to look at strictly our favorite players that we're most excited about going into the season. And from there, so that when we get to the end of the season, to January, we can look back and going into the NFL draft and see who rose, who fell. If you remember from a couple of years ago, the talk of the town was Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell. They were 1 and 2, and it was like they were primed to go number 1 in the NFL draft. Didn't happen. Spencer Rattler, his stock dropped. He went back to college. He ended up transferring to South Carolina. Sam Howell did declare. Didn't work out for him. He was a 5th round pick for Washington. But having said that, he is now starting in the NFL. So that's a really long-winded way of introing the show. But I think that the way I wanted to do this was I wanted to go 1 to 10 because, like I was just saying to you guys, there is no surprise about who number 1 is. Caleb Williams, 6'1", 215 pounds, so a good size. He transferred with Lincoln Riley, if you remember, from Oklahoma Sooners, who in their day were not a bad team. They had Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray carrying them for many years. And then they sort of dropped away when Spencer Rattler came in and it started to fall apart. Caleb Williams beat him out for the job. And then I want to say, didn't Caleb Williams get benched at some point and then Spencer Rattler came back in for the Sooners? I'm trying to think.
Yeah. Early on in Caleb's first season, I think it was.
It was. But ultimately, Caleb Williams was the kind of quarterback who wanted to follow Lincoln Riley where he went, and he ended up moving to USC. He had an awesome season last year. 4,500 plus yards, 42 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Not to mention 10 rushing touchdowns, 380 yards on the ground. He had an 88.5 passing grade, which I think was 2nd or 3rd in college football. He had 31 big-time throws, 76.1 adjusted completion percentage. And these stats are coming from Pro Football Focus. Shout out NFL Stock Exchange with Trevor Sycamore and Connor Rogers, but some of the best guys to do it. Very good at seeing the whole field. He can defend. He can move deep. He can manipulate defenses with his eyes. He's very good at doing that, as opposed to some of these other quarterbacks who will maybe still learn that. He can throw across the field well. He's got a big rushing body. He can break tackles well. Speaking of, he was a running back in high school until his high school coach said, you throw the ball too damn well to be a running back. So they moved him to quarterback, which is amazing because usually it happens the other way around. And I'll finish this. I'll let you guys chime in a second. But what I wanted to finish was, Brad, your Carolina Panthers, who just took Bryce Young first overall. You got to think about what was Bryce Young's number one quality that made him the number one pick, right? It was his football IQ. It was like his between the ears, kind of like able to read defense as well and make plays and adjust accordingly. So Bryce Young, under pressure, had a 70.8 passer, which was number 2 in the league. And that was his selling point, number 2. The best in the league was Caleb Williams, was 79.7. That was number 1. So not only does he do all these things and he has the right body type, he also, his drop off from poise in the pocket to under pressure, his yards per attempt is 9. His under pressure rating is 8.6. Like there's no difference there. And just to finish as well, one of the things that made Zach Wilson the number 2 overall pick was his ability under pressure and his ability to scramble. In college, he had an awesome offensive line, and obviously that didn't transpire. But there's not much that he can't do. He's still got some things to work on. But let's kick it off with that. How does that sound?
Yeah, perfect. He was number 1 on my list. Now, the way that we're also going to look at this, just to peek behind the curtain for everyone, is we spoke earlier today about this, and we all have different ways that we evaluate the quarterbacks and stuff like that. So he is a guy who I would be intrigued, and I'll throw this over to Dan in just a sec. If he was eligible in the draft that's just gone, does he go number 1 instead of Bryce Young? Or is it so close between the two that it's a toss-up as to personal preference, and then therefore, if Carolina liked Bryce Young, he would have gone number 1, and then Caleb might have gone number 2 to Houston? Like, what would your thoughts be if he was available to have come out in this year's draft?
I think 100% he was number 1 pick. I just think he's got so much talent, so much upside, and he's only as good as he had last season, as good a season as he had. I think he's only just starting to scratch the surface as well. I think he can get even better.
Yeah.
And you compare him to Bryce Young, they're different quarterbacks in the sense that Bryce Young's more, I guess, that cerebral type quarterback, whereas Caleb Williams is that more ad-lib type, but he can do that cerebral type as well. So he just covers everything, I think. And, I think there was no doubt that if he came out last year, he'd be number 1. I can't see him not going number 1 this year. Well, I just think the talent is so amazing there, and you just watch him play, and he's almost toying with the defenses.
Yeah.
It's scary watching him. There was a play that I watched him, his pockets collapse. He's under pressure everywhere, and he's just moving around in the pocket. They're not getting to him. He's able to move his body, keep his feet going, and he's keeping his eyes downfield the entire time. And he gets to the point where he's there, he's almost moved himself into a corner sort of thing, and he's just started backpedaling and looking at the defense of what they're doing, and he just takes off and scoots out on a bootleg. And he throws a missile down the sideline and connects with the receiver.
Mm. Yeah.
You can't teach that sort of thing. It's just there for him.
Under pressure last season, 14 touchdowns, no interceptions. Is insane in those moments. He kind of has that, like I was saying, that broken tackle rate. It kind of reminds me of, you're saying, like, would you rather have taken Bryce Young or CJ Stroud? Why not imagine a player who was both of them basically put together, like the poise, the accuracy, the ability to scramble, the ability to read and process defenses.
That's where I think, too, this exercise can be handy, because we've just recently had the draft, and obviously not everyone is into college football as much as you guys are, and we're going to be for this season and bringing updates on the players. But this is a really good aspect to sort of go, okay, we've just seen the draft. We've seen all the positive things said about Bryce Young. We've seen all the negatives. We've seen all the positive about CJ Stroud, et cetera, et cetera. how can we compare these crop of quarterbacks that we're going to go through to some of these guys? So you can sort of go, okay, I've seen all this stuff about these guys. How does it relate to these people? And if they're all in the same draft class, like we said, if you were going to take Caleb Williams 1, then that sort of, you look at that compared with these other quarterbacks and you go, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud were really good, Anthony Richardson, really top quality prospects, but we would all still probably have Caleb Williams over them. So that just puts him in that tier of going, okay, that's the elite of the elite. And if we would still take him over these guys, he must be pretty special for that. So that's why I'm liking the idea of this show, so we can compare them to these other players and sort of go, you know, who would you take? How do they compare? And, you know, as you sort of were saying, John, about this with a dynasty show, project some of these guys for people when they have their rookie drafts towards the end of the year, that we've been able to bring certain stats and just really, you know, sort of almost mesh Devy type of fantasy football with dynasty and really sort of show how they can help each other and just how much they move during the year. Because like you said, before the start of this season, no one probably would have had Anthony Richardson very high in their rookie draft.
He wouldn't have even existed on
exactly.
draft boards. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, to have these guys be able to see how they move throughout the year. But as you said, Caleb Williams, by far and away, number one. He's up here by himself.
Yeah.
He's there and he'll probably stay there. It would have to take something absolutely catastrophic for him to drop from that number one spot, I think, this season.
It absolutely would. And that's a really good point. You know, sometimes you'll hear the comps to Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck. And the reason for that, I understand, even though, look, I don't think he is at that Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck tier, but I would say he is a step below, is that sort of exact reason of there's few quarterback players that come through the system that, you know, you see them in year one or year two and you just go, wow, they're NFL ready. Like his stats are so elite that it would take, like you say, he basically only injury would probably stall him, because there's no player in his sort of category that has ever taken such a step back once they've reached that level. And to Dan's point, he should only go from there. Last two things I just wanted to mention that I think are important to bring up. In the 2021 quarterback class, he was the number 2 recruit, just behind Quinn Ewers, who was number 1, who we'll probably talk about. And then also he won the Heisman last year as well. So excellent player. But let's jump into number 2, which my number 2 was, I think it is pretty much consensus number 2, although I've seen him fall a little bit in other people's, but Drake Maye from UNC, 6'4", 225 pounds. Again, another quarterback who is great sort of like size and mobility. He had a 92.2 passer grade. That was the best in college football last season. He had 44 big time throws. That was 4th best in all of college football. 76.5 adjusted completion percentage, 10 turnover worthy plays. That was top 15 as well, in a good way. One of the things I like about him, he committed to Alabama and then changed at the last minute to North Carolina. He had the most rushing attempts of any quarterback in college football last season. Now, not in always a good way. A lot of them weren't designed, but there was a lot of scrambling. And also the running backs at North Carolina aren't sort of the most superior. He's got good arm strength and he understands coverages very well. His receivers last year that he played with were Josh Downs and Antoine Green, who we might be talking about coming up in the wide receivers show in a couple of weeks. But number 2 for me, Drake Maye. What do you think? What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, I'm with you on that as well. I think it's like, you look at him, first season starting, he was 20 years old, and to put up the numbers that he did at North Carolina, that's pretty crazy to think. So you just have to think, like, what's the progression going to be this year? Where's the improvement coming from? And I think there's still a whole lot of improvement to come with him just naturally because of experience. And then you watch him play, and some of the throws that he can make, not a lot of quarterbacks can make it.
Yeah.
And I was talking to you about this yesterday, I think, as well. We were messaging. And like one of the hardest throws or plays to make for a right-handed quarterback is when you roll out to your left and you've got to turn your body, get set, and then find your receiver downfield.
Yeah.
There were so many times where he was doing that and he would pinpoint straight to the receiver. And it was just watching it. Like, I'm a Packers fan and I don't want to compare Drake Maye to Aaron Rodgers, but you see Rodgers make that play every week almost. And we all know the sort of elite passer that Rodgers is to be able to do that. But Drake May's completing some of those passes at 20 years old. And it's just crazy to think about when he does it. And he sets himself when he does it as well. Like, it's not just a panic throw. He's set himself when he's doing it. And he knows what he's doing. So he's really exciting to watch. And I'm looking forward to seeing the improvement in him this year. We might not see it as far as the stats go, but from actual quarterback play, I think we'll definitely see another decent jump out of him as well.
He threw for 4,321 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and then nearly 700 rushing yards. I mentioned the attempts as well, led the college football, and 7 touchdowns. So it can get a little bit Sam Howell-esque in that sort of regard with the rushing, because I guess with a lot of, like, you know, North Carolina is not one of those like big time schools, although he is sort of propelling them to that status. But like you were saying, you know, I think back to, he stood out to me is as early as week 2 last season in that game against Appalachian State, which was an absolute shootout. You might remember it because Appalachian State won in a Hail Mary on the last play of the game.
Oh, yeah.
But having said that, like, Drake Maye played insane. And even from sort of like week 2, 3 onwards, he started leading the, I keep going to say the league. It's not the league. It's the FBS in passing yards. He was impressive. Brad, do you have any thoughts on Drake Maye?
I was just trying to see, I saw a really good comparison for Drake Maye, just, and pro comparisons are pretty hard. I can't find it at the moment, but the pro comparison that kept coming up a fair bit on one of these other ones, because there was a case that was laid out really well, is actually Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
So quality arm, a lot of poise, like just knows where to go, but it's also the, I guess, underrated athletic ability.
Yeah.
Because, you know, some guys are fast, some guys are quick, and some guys are sneaky fast. He sort of seems like a sneaky fast, sort of super athletic. Like, you might look at him and go, he's not going to cause us too many problems. And then, like you said, a play breaks down, he on a boot, he takes off and suddenly he's gone. And it's sort of, you know, like you were sort of saying, he just seems to, trying to think of it, from the games that I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of him, like full games and scouting and stuff like that as part of the way that I look at these guys. But
yeah,
he's just got that poise. Like the one thing that I really like in quarterbacks when I watch them is the ability to make it seem like this guy is, everything's slow for him. So if you can watch a quarterback and he gets back in his stance and then he goes through his progressions, 1, 2, 3, not there, I've seen the lane, I can get up and go. He seems to be that sort of guy who he seems sometimes to be going in slow motion.
Yeah. Yeah, super competitive.
And I think that sometimes is your mark of a really good quarterback. The guys who look frantic and rushed and just don't always look in the right spot. They look for their first read. It's not their bam. They're gone. They're trying to run. He goes through his progression still, steps up when needs to, but it's just that whole nothing seems to phase him. And that to me is one of those things that I think will help propel him in his pro career when he gets down there. And I want to see it not progress, but I want to see him keep that for this year and just see how good he can actually be when, like you said, he's lost his best receiver in Josh Downs this year.
Yeah.
How does he go with his new guy? Because we saw what happened previous years with Sam Howe when he had Javonte and he had De'Ami Brown, and then the next season those guys weren't there and he sort of took that step back. Will Drake Maye be something similar, or will he still just have that poise to be able to pick up the guys around him and turn them into decent players and be able to make North Carolina a competitive team again?
And it's going to be exciting from week 1. They play South Carolina. So it'll be Drake Maye versus Spencer Rattler, which we will talk about potentially if we get to maybe later. But they've got some other big games against Pitt will be a big one. Syracuse has been playing. They played well last season, even though they tailed off a little bit. They've got their games against Clemson as well. But other than that, it is a pretty favorable schedule for them. Appalachian State, week 2, they'll want their revenge. Minnesota is nothing to cry home too much about. And then small schools, Campbell. So excited for Drake Maye. Any last parting comments with him? Let's jump to... So my number 3...
I just see he can make a real statement.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Where do you think he'll go in the draft at this point if he keeps this up this time next year? Could you see teams wanting to take him number 1 over Caleb Williams? Maybe if it's like a schematic fit.
No. I think Caleb, because even say if you get like I
don't think so, but
no. I think like if you get Arizona, say Arizona ends up with the first pick, and Arizona sits there and they can go, well, do we want Caleb Williams or do we want to keep Kyler Murray? Even if they decide to keep Kyler Murray, they would be able to get an absolute king's ransom for that first overall pick. And whoever takes that would probably go up and get Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like the draft when the talk at the time was Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, or Justin Fields, or Trey Lance, those guys. Anyone who had the number 1 pick was going to pick Trevor Lawrence. It didn't matter how much. Doesn't matter now how much the Chicago Bears sit there and say, "Oh, we really like Justin Fields." That's all well and good, but you would have picked Trevor Lawrence if you had the number 1 pick.
For sure, it's exactly what I mentioned with Hutch when we had him on the show the other week. Like the Bears are going to be sitting in a great position if Carolina struggles with a new rookie quarterback. If the Bears can't get it together, if they're not a plus 500 team, they're going to be sitting in such a sweet spot to trade up and get that number 1 pick. So we will see. Okay, so yeah, my number 3 and number 4 could have gone either way. I'm going to do a quick pivot. I'm going to change it up. I'm going to go with Michael Penix Jr. from Washington via Indiana. Now, Michael Penix Jr. has been in the league for quite a long time. He has dealt with many, many injuries, but he's quite a fantastic player. He's in his 6th season now. So he's 6'3", 216 pounds. Last season, he threw for 4,641 passing yards. Like I said, big red flags are his injury history. He's not a huge rusher as well. He doesn't really have that rushing upside that you kind of want in Caleb Williams or Drake Maye that you see. He does have a 90.1 passing grade, 25 big time throws, 74.7 adjusted completion percentage, and 7 turnover worthy plays. And with adjusted completion percentage, you wanted the best in the NFL, or the average in the NFL sits around about 70%. That can go down to about 65% when under pressure. Some of these quarterbacks you'll see, so that's why we talked about Caleb Williams is so amazing, because it just doesn't drop. But some of these that we'll start to talk about now, there is kind of like starts to get a bit of a dip. He plays alongside his running backs last season were Wayne Talapapa and Cameron Davis. And the one that I'm really excited about, his wide receivers, which we will definitely talk about on the wide receivers show, is Rome Odunze, who had the 1,000+ yards last season. Jalen McMillan, 1,000+ yards last season. I think that they might have been the only team in FBS to have 2 receivers record plus 1,000-yard seasons. So super exciting there as well. I'll get your thoughts on Michael Penix Jr.
So he's kind of the more your prototypical pocket passer quarterback.
Yeah.
As opposed to your Caleb Williams, Drake Mays. So he does all his work from the pocket. He doesn't, like you said, he's not going to scare anyone with his legs. He can move around, but he's not doing it to rush first. But he can buy enough time in the pocket to extend the plays as well. He's got a big-time arm, but like you said, there's so many concerns over the injuries. He's going to be 24, I think, when the NFL season starts.
For reference,
drafted.
He's torn both his ACLs, not at the same time, obviously, but in one season, he tore an ACL with Indiana. He came back the next season. I think he had a shoulder issue, and then the next season he tore another ACL. If you can find a part of your body, he's injured it badly.
And I mean, you look back at his stats, and they didn't jump out at you because of these injuries. So there wasn't sort of anything to base it on before this last season. But he goes to Washington and he absolutely lights it up. Can he back it up, and can he stay healthy now? That's going to be the biggest thing for him this year, to have another big season stats-wise. And then just to stay healthy is going to be the biggest thing for him. Because if he has any other sort of injury this year, NFL teams are going to look at him and go, right, he's right down our board now.
Yeah,
and he could fall way down the draft just based on all those injuries. So it's pretty scary when you think about it, but the talent's definitely there. The ability's there. The arm strength is there. The way he uses his arm, the way he can move in the pocket. I like it all, except for the injuries.
Yeah, injuries for me, when I start to hear the number of injuries that a player, especially a quarterback, start to have, that to me is red flag straight away. So I will be keen on watching him, as you guys were saying, just to see if he can last the year without getting hurt. Because it really does seem like one of those things. If he has a significant injury, well, maybe not even a significant injury, but if he misses 5 to 6 weeks because of an injury, where does he fall in the draft then? Does he become a day 2 pick, day 3? Like just based off of injuries alone? Yeah,
I mean, a good comp might even be Hendon Hooker.
I was actually about to ask that. That was my
was also
thought.
Yeah, is a fantastic passer, but tore his ACL, went through the draft process, and fell to the second day. So I think there is a lot of that in it. Having said that, like let's make the assumption that he doesn't get injured and he plays the season. He has similar numbers. Is he a day 1 pick? Some of these game logs that I want to bring up from last season. So against Arizona, he threw for 516 yards and 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. Again, granted, Arizona's not a big school. Washington State, huge rivalry, 485 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 2 rushing touchdowns. Against Oregon, who's a good team, and Bo Nix, who was the other guy we're about to talk about, 408 yards, 2 touchdowns. Michigan State, 397 yards. His lowest passing yardage game was against Colorado last season were the worst team in all of FBS, 229 and 1. And that's probably, I'm guessing, because he didn't have to throw a lot.
I would say he'll probably end up being a first round pick for the pure fact as well. Like you said, if he stays healthy and he goes through the season, puts up similar sort of stats, he's going to, there's a lot of aging quarterbacks in this league who might be gone. So there'll be teams lower down that could be looking for a quarterback of the future, or they've moved on from someone like, to me, maybe a good place actually for him, just thinking of this off the top of my head. Would you like to see him in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison?
Oh, yeah. That's a great call.
So, to me, he would be there also, too, for the pure fact that besides last year when Kenny Pickett went in the first round, can you remember another draft where there wasn't a quarterback? There was only 1 quarterback in the first round. Usually there's 2 between 2 and about 4 or 5. Yeah. And that was I want to say 2013. It was when EJ Manuel went 16 to the Bills.
Yeah, it was the only one, yeah.
So, I doubt that it's just going to be 2 quarterbacks in the first round this year.
This particular class is stacked. I think there's going to be 5.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me because there's so many, like just looking at some of the older quarterbacks in this league or people who could move around just based off of their jobs alone, like Jimmy G could be out of a job this year.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray could be on the move. Justin Fields potentially could be on the move based on how he goes. Like,
Bucks don't know what they're doing. Jets might need a quarterback. You never know.
Jets might need a quarterback.
Patriots
could be, you start going down the list and you start going, there's teams that it starts popping up. So I do think he would be a first-round pick. To me, just thinking about it now, like I said, him to Minnesota with having those guys and Hawkinson as well, that would be, if he can stay healthy, that would be a great pickup for them, I think.
Yeah, and circle back around to that idea that you're talking about, Brad, because we'll get to the end. And, I did say that I think there could be 5 quarterbacks in the first round this next draft. Once I read off all these names, there's some names who I'm not even going to talk about today, but they could shoot up. I could definitely see them shooting up.
Yeah.
Let's jump to, I just wanted to mention some of the good matchups that Washington has this year. So they do play USC against Caleb Williams. That'll be fantastic. Cam Rising and Utah they play against, which will be another good game. They also play Oregon State and DJ Uiagalelei, if he's still playing. And now let's jump. They play Oregon and Bo Nix, who I want to talk about now as well. I did have him 3, and as I just mentioned, I did sort of do a pivot. Reason being, my thing with Bo Nix at 4 is his years in Auburn were not great, and he had to bail them out of a lot of games, but he was sort of the making of his own sort of murderer's row in those games as well. He moves to Oregon now. He's 6'2", 213. So again, another really good size, all these quarterbacks that we're talking about. And this guy, he is absolutely built. He is ripped. 79.2 passing grade, so a bit less than the other guys. 14 big time throws. Is he a victim of the Oregon system like Justin Herbert was? Hard to say. 82.6 adjusted completion percentage. Not bad at all. Gets the ball out well under pressure. 1.9 turnover worthy plays percentage. That was one of the lowest in all of college football as well. Also reads the defense well. He was only sacked 6 times, so he had a lot of opportunities to make great plays and make the checkdowns that he needed. His running backs are very good as well. He's got Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington, who I think are going to be very good, who we might be talking about next week. And then his receivers, Troy Franklin and Chase Cotter. We might not be talking about those the week after those. So Bo Nix, what are the thoughts? I think he's divisive.
He is divisive because, like you said, when he was at Auburn, he was going to be borderline undraftable almost.
Yeah. That's the nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
Oh, we've lost him.
He's gone.
Jump in, Brad.
Yeah, no, I see he is a polarizing sort of guy because, like you said, there's the 2 versions of him.
Yeah.
And is the Oregon version the one that you would get in the NFL, or is it the Auburn version? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things. It's like I have a hard time with him because, like I've said to you guys offline, I scout these guys a lot differently. So I haven't watched a ton of these guys in their game. So if some of my analysis isn't the same as John or what Dan was when he was here, that's my reasoning for why. because I will usually wait until towards the end of the season to come back on these guys. But from the games that I've seen, he has that ability, and you see those flashes where you could see him being, like you said, your 3rd-ranked quarterback or whatever. But then, how long will that stick for? Like, or has he grown pretty much what I'm trying to say? Has he grown out of those bad habits and those undraftable days that he was early on in his college career?
Absolutely. He threw for 3,500 passing yards last season, nearly 3,600, which, if you've been paying attention, is way less than the previous 3 quarterbacks that I've just mentioned. At Auburn, he threw for 2,500, 2,400, and 2,200. He was highly anticipated coming out of high school, and he was a good recruit, but it kind of never translated. And then, again, like I was saying before, he was kind of like the making of his own sort of fate that I found. I'm just trying to bring up his game logs. Where am I? Oh, that's Oregon game logs. Hang on.
So if he was in the previous draft, would have he gone before Will Levis, do you think, or after?
I think he would have gone before Will Levis, predominantly because he has the sort of like the prototypical body that you'd want out of a quarterback that I don't think that you find in Will Levis. Meanwhile, I think he still has all the similar mechanics and can still do all the same sort of things as Will Levis. One thing that he did start to do was he won Oregon a lot of games. So they only dropped 3 games last season. They lost to Oregon State, which was a really, really tough matchup in their rival. Oregon State's much better these days. They lost to Washington. Again, we just mentioned Michael Penix Jr. And then the other loss came against Georgia, who we all know Georgia.
National champs.
Yeah, the miniature NFL team. So
Not so miniature. Those dudes were monstrous.
Exactly. He had some really great wins in there against Cal, UCLA, in Dorian Robinson-Thompson. Beat Utah, as we were talking about Cam Rising before, and Arizona, Colorado, and Stanford as well. And Stanford were not a bad team as well. So I think that he has a lot of great attributes that can put it together. I will be interested to see if he is a first-round pick next season. He's not in my 5 that I think could shoot in there because I just wonder if his ceiling is capped.
I'd be more surprised to see him trend upwards towards the back end of the first round than to see him drop back towards the end of the second, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if you tell me, we're here in 12 months' time and with the 26th pick, the Minnesota Vikings, keep using the Vikings, it's the first team that popped up, but the Minnesota Vikings draft Bo Nix, that would surprise me more than if he got there and said that the New England Patriots took him at 57 in the second round. So that's sort of my thought on him. So I won't keep harping on him for too much longer. I know we're not running out of time, but we've still got a few guys to get through first otherwise we'll be here for 3 or 4 hours.
No, but that's really good. That makes a lot of sense. And the other thing about that, those 4 guys were the main 4. There is one more that I want to talk about now, and I'm glad that Dan's making his way back in because I think that he's going to have some really great things to say about him as well. And that is Jordan Travis out of Florida State via Louisville and Baylor. Dan, I'm glad that you managed to make it back in time for us to talk about Jordan Travis because I think that you're going to have a lot of great things to say about him because he is, in my opinion, one of the most exciting players in this coming sort of class of quarterbacks. And he is someone who I definitely think can jump into the first round. If Anthony Richardson pans out this rookie season as well, even more so. So Jordan Travis, 6'1", 212 pounds. That's 12th and 19th percentile. So he's not the biggest guy, but he is a really great dual threat quarterback. 82 attempts last season for 417 rushing yards, 5.1 yards a carry. He had a 90.1 passing grade, 27 big time throws, 4.2 missed tackles per carry. One of the things I love about this, and as they were saying on NFL Stock Exchange, if you caught it, was that's some of the highest missed tackle rates per carry that you will find. Like Javonte Williams, who has one of the all-time, he was 4.44. Even Bijan Robinson was around this 4.2 missed tackle rate per carry. This is what Jordan Travis is as well. Top 15 in big-time throw rate. Very low turnover worthy plays as well. 72.5 adjusted completion percentage, 58% under pressure. So it does drop down. And that's what I was just talking about before between, those similarities when you get someone like Zach Wilson type. It drops down tremendously to 58% under pressure, but 1.9% turnover worthy plays is great. He plays with running back Trey Benson, who, if you tune into next week's episode, you could be hearing about the number 1 running back in the class as well. Treshaun Ward, his receivers, Johnny Wilson as well, and Ontario Wilson. Johnny Wilson, one of the also exciting receivers to come through as well. So that's my bit on Jordan Travis. Is Dan here or what's he doing?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, here.
He's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's you just sit back and watch what he can do, like with his legs, with his arm. He's got an upper echelon arm. It's just what he can do at his size as well. The size is a bit of a concern, but it's just the excitement factor with him.
Yeah.
And yeah, if he can improve again this year, then he's going to really stand out to a lot of NFL teams with the way the game's played these days. Like if you went back a number of years, you wouldn't look at Jordan Travis and think he's going to be an NFL quarterback. But now with the way it's played, he's going to be able to come in and be able to do a lot of things for an NFL team if he gets on the field. So I'm excited to watch him this year and see if he can develop himself even more into that sort of NFL type quarterback, because I think that's the next step that he needs to take. And if he can do that, then he'll skyrocket up the draft boards and teams will get excited about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, as I said, with my way that I scout, I haven't seen a lot of the remaining guys that are in here, and done a lot of deep dive into. But do either of you have not necessarily a great player comparison, but have you got a guy that he just reminds you of in certain aspects, the way he plays?
I haven't really, because I haven't really thought about it in that sense. Like when I was watching him, I just watch him as him.
Yeah.
I haven't been trying to watch him as who does he remind me of in the NFL. I haven't gone to that point with him yet. I'll end up doing that further along in the season, but yeah, I think it'd be tough with him to try and compare him with people at the moment.
Yeah, I think so as well, because he is sort of that little bit smaller body, not like insanely athletic, but he does run the ball very, very well. And like I was saying before, I think the thing about Florida State that it's going to be most impressive this season is the combination of Jordan Travis and Trey Benson rushing together, and the passing combination to Johnny Wilson, who's an amazing receiver. You know, they finished, just taking a look now, last season, they finished ranked 11th in the FBS. They had some fierce games that they played really well. They lost, unfortunately, to Florida and Anthony Richardson in that matchup, but that would be a game that would be worth going back and having a look at. They did sort of lose a few sort of key games to Clemson, who weren't particularly great, but they snuck out these wins. They beat Drake May in North Carolina as well. They beat Syracuse. Lost to Wake Forest, who I'm excited to maybe talk about at the end as well. And like I was saying, not amazing splits, but I think in this system, again, like I was saying before, we'll see what Anthony Richardson can do in his first year, but he could be paving the way and people might see Jordan Travis at the end of this season and think that is absolutely what we need on our team.
Perfect.
Let's jump now to, okay, so number 6 I've got here. And Dan, those 5, I'll just repeat them again. So Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and Jordan Travis. Do you have them any different?
Personally, I had JJ McCarthy, top 5.
Woo! Oh, excellent. Okay, let's talk about him after this next person. Number 6 for me is Quinn Ewers. Like I was saying before, so he was the number 1 recruit to come out of high school in 2021. 6'2", 204 pounds, so a little bit on the smaller side. He had a 70.9% passing grade, 19 big-time throws. I should also mention he plays at Texas. Top 30% big-time throw percentage as well, 67.5 adjusted completion percentage. That drops all the way down to 51% under pressure. 12 turnover-worthy plays. And he did also get injured last season against Alabama, and he really struggled with injury throughout the season as well as it continued on. That was after week 2. This season, it's going to be trickier for him. He's not going to have Bijan Robinson anymore. He's not going to have Roschon Johnson anymore at running back. He does still have Xavier Worthy, though, and Jordan Whittington. So these 2 receivers for him could take a massive step up. I'm going to be honest, I struggle with Quinn Ewers. And most of the time, you watch that Alabama game and there's plays where you're just like, holy crap, this guy's amazing. I can see why he was the number 1 recruit. And then there's plenty of other plays in games where you just think, what is going on? And it shows in his under pressure rate as well.
I'm just curious too, will Texas fans, if he gets off to a bad start, will they be clamoring for Arch Manning to take over?
So there is also that. This is, no matter what, his last year at Texas, right? Whether he declares for the draft or if he doesn't, he's not going to be playing at Texas because there's no way Arch Manning's going to be riding pine for another season.
He could be the quarterback under the most amount of pressure this season.
Yeah.
Based on the expectations, and then Arch Manning coming in as well. He's going to be on the hot seat anytime he doesn't play well.
And that was my thought too. You see some people deal really well with pressure, and will the pressure of having the next great Manning behind him, will that become something that becomes too much for him and could completely fall off? Like you said, the not the face of the earth in that, but like you said, it'll be his last year at Texas, whether he declares or not. But it'll just be curious to see, can he handle the pressure of having maybe the next great Manning sitting behind him? Yeah. And, like I said, if he starts off the season, they have a couple really bad games and he doesn't look great, you can't tell me that those Longhorn fans aren't going to be screaming for Arch Manning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's also got... Yeah, sorry, go.
Like I said, that either makes or breaks his season. Like, if he can come out and everyone knows the pressure he's going to be under, if he can come out and actually look like the number one overall prospect this season, then his stock boosts up massively. And Arch Manning will sit on the bench for the season, and Quinn Ewers will probably wind up being a mid to high-ish first-round pick in the draft if he has a massive season.
He does sort of also suffer from the same problem that Spencer Rattler has this season as well, which is really tough schedule. Like, they have to play Alabama. They've got to play Kansas State, who by all accounts should be better. TCU, I don't think they'll be as good. They've lost so many key players in Max Duggan and Quentin Johnson, Kendra Miller. BYU will not be easy. Houston will be tough as well. And the Sooners could take a jump back. So he has to play at that elite level that will propel him into the first round, because if he doesn't, it's exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah. He could have a pretty decent sort of fall come draft day. Like, he's expected to be a first-round pick, I think, still.
Still, yeah.
So
a lot of people like him as well. He's got a lot of supporters who really, really like him. So I will wait and see. They play the first game Texas plays is against Rice, so it'll be good to see him play a professional sort of game there. But then he plays Alabama week 2. So that's going to be a real test. And you never know. By week 3, they play Wyoming. If that doesn't go too well, they should win that. But if then they play Baylor, like if that starts to fall apart, we could be hearing Arch Manning by week 4 chanting.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's just a little bit on Quinn Ewers. Let's go a bit more sort of spitfire around. Let's move to JJ McCarthy, because he was not in my top 10, and it's not for lack of talent as well. I just found that the other ones I'm sort of more closely looking at, but he is rising. I've got to say, even over just the last week of preparing for this show, I think JJ McCarthy is rising. My problems with him have always been the Michigan system. They've never asked him to do a lot. They rely heavily on their running backs to win big games, and he doesn't always bail them out of tricky positions. In fact, he can put them in tricky positions. He's a lot smaller guy. Brad, if you like Bryce Young and his size and physique, JJ McCarthy is like a taller version of that, so he looks a lot skinnier as well. So he needs to be prepared to take
5 inches on Bryce Young.
Yeah, so he's much taller though, but
15 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, hit me with your JJ McCarthy talk, because he has won the job as well over the years. He beat, I'm trying to think, it was Shea Patterson and
Cade McNamara last year.
Cade McNamara, who's now transferred.
He beat him out, yeah.
Yeah, so there are really good things about him.
I just think you watch him play, and there's a lot of plays where you just look at and go, what were you doing?
Yeah.
And you can just tell he's a 20-year-old kid still trying to find his feet. But then you'll see some of the plays where he bounces straight back the next play and he pulls out something amazing, and you're like, okay, he's just made a bad play. Could have been an interception, whatever. He survived that, and he's turned around the very next play and he's absolutely nailed it to his wide receiver, and they've kept it going. And he does that so often, where he's just right on to the next play. Doesn't matter what happens, he's on to the next play, on to make a play. I think I've got him as high as I do just because I think this is such an important year for him. And it's his offense now, it's his team now.
Yeah.
He's in a position where they started to ask more of him as the season went on. And he stepped up. Can he make another step up this year, being the guy from the start, knowing he's going in as the guy? How much can he improve this year as he matures as well? And there's just something about him when you watch him play. It's hard to explain. But like I said, he just bounces back no matter what happens. He's just straight on to the next play. He doesn't let it get to him. And it doesn't sort of snowball when he does make a bad play. And to me, that's the sign of a good quarterback, where you just put it behind you and move on and make a play the next time. And he can put balls in tight windows. And I just think if he can take a good step with his progression this year, then I think we'll be looking at him a lot different to what we have in the last 12 months.
My question for him then, just based off of like all of that stuff that you're saying, Dan, is, yeah, it's great. Every time he has like almost a bad play, he can't remember, like, you know, he's got that short-term memory, he moves on. If he doesn't cut out those bad plays, will that actually just work against him? Because everyone's going, oh yeah, it was all well and good, he threw that terrible interception, then he came back and played well, but will that not work against him moving towards the NFL when teams are going, well, just stop making the bad plays?
Yeah, that goes for everyone though.
Yeah.
True, but like if you're like what you're saying, you know, he can constantly do that. Like you're looking at it, so like you can see it with some guys. You see it maybe once a game or once every couple of games. You just sit there and all of a sudden you go, what were you thinking? But if he's doing it multiple times per game, when does it get to the point where the teams in the NFL are going, just stop? Just don't do that part. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And he needs to cut it out of the game. So whether he can or not this year, we'll see. But I think the reason it stands out as much as it does is because they've used him as a bit of a game manager in their system. So when he does make those mistakes, I think it's quantified a lot more and it stands out a lot more than, say, another quarterback that's just throwing bombs all over the place for the whole game. So that's definitely something he's got to work. That's probably the biggest thing he's got to work on. So, but he's like 20 years old. I think he doesn't turn 21 until the season's over, I believe. So he'll be 21 when it comes to draft time. So he's just still super young, especially compared to a lot of these other quarterbacks on these lists.
Yeah, sort of has that Anthony Richardson age factor about him where he is super young. He does have, I think that TCU playoff game has left a sort of a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths as well, where he does have, I think Zach Wilson is not too far off of what you think about when you hear him. You know, his completion percentage for the year was 64.6. It did drop down a lot when under pressure as well. I have to wonder if, you know, like when he didn't necessarily bail them out of games when it was on the line, like I was saying before, and that's why they did rely so heavily on the run game. They had some, I will say, impressive wins against Ohio State. Other than that, like Penn State, another good win. So they did have a really, really good season. And Brad, to your point and what you were saying, like this is every quarterback, like, yeah, there is that sort of like every quarterback in college, because they are just young kids still finding their way, has that sort of like, what are you doing moment about them? But this is their opportunity to learn about, like CJ Stroud, one of the most accurate quarterbacks in this class that has just gone past. He had a lot of plays where it's just like, oh man, what are you doing? but you don't really doubt CJ Stroud now.
No, but I think the thing is though, like I don't mind a quarterback having that moment in college if there's one a game or one every couple of games. You know what I mean? Like it's when you start to see it once every 3 drives. And then it's suddenly there's 5 of those moments in the game where you're like, oh, that's just. And it's funny that you actually, well, what I was actually thinking of when you actually brought him up, the Zach Wilson sort of thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that, one of the quotes that this past season Zach Wilson made when he got asked, you know, when he's in trouble, why he sometimes throws the ball up for a receiver and then hopes that they make a play. and his comment pretty much was along the lines of, will I get bored if I have to throw the ball away and throw it out of bounds? You don't want, you make the smart play. So, yes, you would like to be that guy who does the Mahomes type of thing and throw one up and hope that your receiver can catch it. But at the end of the day, take the smart play, throw the ball out of bounds. Like, it's just funny when you were actually talking. My next point was to bring up was it sounds very Zach Wilson vibe-ish. And you don't want him to end up as Zach Wilson.
Now, let's jump to someone who we'll quick fire these because we want to try and remain under an hour if possible. Someone who's not compared to Patrick Mahomes at all. For me, it's Cam Rising out of Utah. Really quickly on Cam Rising, I love what he's been able to do there. He threw for 3,000 passing yards last season, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Doesn't sound great, but over his last 2 years at Utah, 5,570 yards, 46 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. That's not a bad stat line at all. Other thing I really like about him is, Utah last season, they were a top 10 team, top 10 school. And like their defense is great, but nothing to cry home about. And he was playing, his number one receiver last season was Dalton Kincaid, who he's now lost, sure. But he has not really had the support around him and he's still been able to make it work. So I really like Cam Rising. Any thoughts on Cam Rising for you guys?
Oh, I just love watching him play. He's as tough as they come.
Yeah.
He's just that quarterback that you want on your team. If he's your quarterback on your team with a college, NFL, let's be honest, he's probably more than likely going to be a backup quarterback.
For sure.
Most of his career in the NFL.
And all of these guys that we're about to talk about, if they even make it to, third string backup on the Arizona Cardinals and your name's Clayton Tune, we'll be happy with that.
Hey, hang on. Clayton Tune's a starting quarterback on week 1. Come on.
That's right.
But Cam Rising's just that sort of quarterback you want on your team. Just you want him in that locker room. You want him in the quarterback room. There's just something about him that you know what you're going to get. He's just as tough as they come. And he just doesn't let his teammates down.
Real quick. Yeah, sorry, go.
No, I know. I was just going to say my main thing with any of the quarterbacks that are in college that you're watching for the next season is when they lose their main receiver, their main pass catching option, is how they look the following season. So no Dalton Kincaid, how's he going to look this year? And it doesn't mean that he needs to have a fantastic 5,000 yard, 6,000 yard season. It's just, okay, you don't have your guy. Do you still look similar to what you did? I don't care if your stats are different. I just want to see, are you still doing everything that you were doing before? Progressions, technique, poise, all that sort of stuff. So that's my only thing that my main thing I'll be looking for at him is just how does he look without having Dalton Kincaid there?
Yep. All right, next guy, speaking of losing your key receivers, I want to talk about KJ Jefferson real quick because he has a lot of love. I think he's also another polarizing guy. Some people are very high on him. Could he sneak into the first round? I'm not sure. He's had the last 2 seasons have been okay. It was definitely better for him in 2021 when he had Treylon Burks to help him and be that key guy to throw to. Loses Treylon Burks, still manages to keep up sort of similar stats over that pace. It was only 2,600 passing yards. He threw 21 touchdowns in 2021 and 24 touchdowns in 2022. Only 4 and 5 interceptions across that time, though, as well. So it hasn't been too bad. It's funny, we were talking about him today, and it's hard to make player comparisons. I see a lot of Dwayne Haskins in him, just in his sort of mechanics. However, Dwayne Haskins was not a rusher. He was terrible mobility.
He was a statue.
But incredible accuracy and incredible. He smashed so many records at Ohio State. Having said that, KJ Jefferson is not sort of that level of a passer as well. He does under pressure. Still managed to keep up a fairly good rating. His completion percentage overall for the season was 68%, which you want to see. Arkansas have a tough schedule this season, though. They play some really key teams, and there's going to be some key matchups early as well. So what are your thoughts on KJ Jefferson real quick?
I think you look at his size, and he's 6'3", 240 plus.
Yeah, huge.
And he can move as well with that size. he's going to get into the NFL, and whether he's a starter, backup that works his way into being a starter, he's going to be able to run a lot of dual option sort of plays for a team, and he's going to be dangerous when he does because of that size. He's hard to bring down. I don't want to say the same as, but he could be that Taysom Hill kind of quarterback where he's being used in the red zone, just used as a weapon in the red zone because of his size, because of the way he can move his legs, and because of the way he can pass as well. And he's improved his passing over the last couple of years as well. So another big step from him, and it'll be exciting to watch this year.
Kind of like the way Jacoby Brissett would come in on those big plays in Indianapolis for either Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan over the years.
Yeah, it's going to be good to watch him this year. I'm excited to just see how he goes.
I'm learning a lot of this sort of stuff along with all of our listeners. Like I said, some of these guys I haven't really seen anything, very little, if anything at all. So he's a guy that I've barely seen anything of. So I will keep him on my list because I'd like to see some of those points that you guys are mentioning to see whether he'll actually be someone for, fantasy relevant one day, or if he'll just be a almost sort of guy.
And that's what I was saying. Like a lot of these guys, if they even start one NFL game in their entire career, that's a win. Tough games against potentially BYU, but they come off two very easy small school games. So they play Alabama, they play Ole Miss. Florida could be good. Mississippi State will be very good with, I think that's Will Rogers. Am I right? We'll come to that in a second in any case. Yep. And then they finish with Missouri as well. So that'll be exciting. Dan, in that sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 range, anyone that you have there that I didn't mention?
Okay. I don't think I can have him, realistically, I don't think I can have him within that top 10, but I just want to because I'm excited to see how it goes this year because of everything that we've seen so far, or maybe not seen because of where he was playing to where he's going to be playing now, and that's Shedeur Sanders.
It's time. I'm glad.
You watch him play and he absolutely lights it up. The throws he can make are insane. And you watch it and he'll make throws like that on Sundays in the NFL. But then you go, okay, he's playing at Jackson State. He's playing in the FCS. The competition he's going up against isn't good. But, man, he's just making plays. And you just watch him and he's so poised when he does it. Even when the pocket's collapsing around him, he doesn't panic. And he stays within his structure, and then he can bootleg out and get on the move with his legs. I'm just so excited to watch what he can do with the step up in competition because I think he's got so much potential to be a star for Colorado. And I think he can be a really good quarterback at the next level as well. So I'm excited to see how he settles in moving up to the FBS, how he goes against tougher competition week in, week out. And I don't think Colorado is expected to be a really good team this year.
Only way is up for them.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I'm keen to see what they can do with him at quarterback and how it develops as the season goes along, which I think is the biggest thing for him, is how he develops as the season goes along. He might struggle early on and you look at it and go, oh, geez, the step up's too much for him. I don't think it will be, but I think early on he'll have his moments. And then as the season goes on, I'm excited to see where he ends up. And I don't know if he'll actually declare for the draft this year or if he stays there another year and develops even more. Because, yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him coming up now to more competition week in, week out.
So Shedeur's a guy I have actually watched, and this goes against everything that I've said to you guys. I don't watch a lot of these guys early because I'm too scared that I'll become biased towards them, but I can already tell Shedeur's going to be my Anthony Richardson. If he plays up to his potential, and I really to me, now this might sound hot takey or something, but if he plays as well as what his potential could be, could you see a team take a risk on him and draft him as maybe the third or fourth quarterback? And like, I could see it just based off the traits and the talent. And, even if, like, to me, I've just thought of this one too. So here's his team that's going to draft him. If it doesn't work out with their current crop of quarterbacks, or if they want to put him behind their current starter at the moment and see how he goes, but San Francisco 49ers. Put him with Kyle Shanahan in that Trey Lance sort of spot. Let him sit for a year if it's Brock Purdy or whoever. He's sort of, or even like a Chicago sort of thing. But he's a guy to me who, if he lives up to his potential, I already can see, I'm trying not to be biased, but he's going to become my draft crush as the guy who I'll be screaming from the rooftop that they need to take as the third quarterback behind Drake and Caleb.
He has the family name value, that's for sure, in that kind of stock. Now, having said that, that didn't work out for Thaddeus Moss in Cincinnati at tight end. But I do see what you're saying. Now, when I was watching a couple of his highlights earlier, when Dan mentioned that he wanted to talk about him, because I had not paid too much attention to him, coming from a small school in Jackson State. We're already looking at 133 FBS teams. It's hard not to look at the other even like smaller school names as well. Now, Colorado was ranked 122 out of the 133 that I just mentioned. So like I was saying, the only way is up for them. And I think that, Deion Sanders is going to inject some life into that team. Like I was saying to you earlier when I was watching, so from what I gather, these smaller schools, the people who play sort of cornerback and safety, they're quite big. They almost look like linebackers. And I'm guessing that's because all the prototypical sized players play in the FBS, and then there's not really too much maybe left over for the smaller schools or something like that. It just kind of looked like there were these really big guys, and he was just absolutely slicing people up. So he threw for 3,700 passing yards last season and 40 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And it definitely looked like he was throwing an amazing deep ball, similar to what I saw when I was looking at KJ Jefferson as well. Over the middle, bit tricky, hard to see anything really glaring there, but deep ball was fantastic. One thing that is going to work really tough for him and will be a rude awakening is his schedule. Colorado will be playing. So we talked about TCU earlier as who they start with. That could be sort of like a sneaky backdoor cover, but it might not be easy. They've got to play USC and Caleb Williams. They've got to play Oregon and Bo Nix. They're playing Nebraska and Matt Rule, we were talking about before, Oregon State and DJ Uiagalelei, and Cam Rising at Utah, UCLA. Like there's going to be some really tough games in there. Arizona will be interesting to see how he plays against them because they're not too good. Same with Colorado State. I'm optimistic, and this is the thing. This is why I love college football. It's the same with all these guys. I want to see them do well. I want to see them succeed. I want to see them get drafted, even if it is on day 3.
Yeah,
I find that the most exciting part. So I'm very excited about that. That ties in perfectly with my number 9 that I want to talk about real quick, Spencer Rattler. Look, here's the thing about Spencer Rattler. I want him to do well. He took that South Carolina team who was no good, and he turned them into a competitive team, and they won games last season that they shouldn't have. Not always in part thanks to Spencer Rattler. He was the number one sort of touted, talked about guy in 2020, 2021 era because of his ability, his decision-making ability, and his completion percentage accuracy and other stats like that. Now, he sort of had almost like a Carson Wentz type-esque era just at the college level where he could have gone from MVP, but it fell off a cliff for him and it fell hard, and he's got sort of one of the worst completion percentage now around. Accuracy is a really hard thing for these guys to come back from. Still want to see him do well, but I think he'll be okay with his receivers this year as well. Antoine Wells, I like. Jalen Brooks, I like. Not elite guys, but I think good enough. And South Carolina has produced some okay receivers in the past. So I just wanted to mention him in this sort of range. Again, if he gets drafted to the NFL, that'd be fantastic.
He'll get drafted. this year would determine as to whether he's a higher draft pick or if he's a day 3 sort of guy. He has the talent to go in like you were saying earlier on, he was sort of being projected early days as, if not the first, a first overall pick, that high up sort of thing. And now, there's talk of second, third round, fourth round, whatever it might be, just depending on who you see. But he comes from the background with a guy who I've got on my list for this pure reason. These are guys that I've had on my list as people I want to see just from their background. That's Sam Hartman. They were both in that QB1 Netflix show.
Oh, were they? I've not seen that, but I love Sam Hartman because I really love what he did at Wake Forest last season.
They had some really good quarterbacks on that show. Like the first season, they had Jake Fromm.
Yep.
They had Tate Martell, if anyone remembers Tate Martell.
It's going back.
Rial Mitchell was another one who was there. And like the next season, they had Justin Fields.
Yeah.
So Justin Fields is from that. So, these are guys who I've sort of DJ Uiagalelei was on that show briefly because he went to the same high school as Rial Mitchell. And so it was one of those things that DJ started taking over as the high school senior was on his way out sort of thing, and DJ Uiagalelei sort of showed out and showed up. So a lot of these guys who we're sort of talking about, I will be keeping an eye on for that pure fact that I remember watching them on that quarterback show, and I would like to see them succeed for that reason. But yeah, like you said, Spencer Rattler may be one of the most polarizing guys in this quarterback class that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think you either love him or you hate him.
Yes.
And I don't love him.
No. That's all right.
I'm not a fan of him at all. I don't. You can see the talent, but you've also got to understand the mental aspect of the game, especially at quarterback. And I haven't seen anything from him that shows that he can grasp that side of it. And I don't know. I think the time's ticking on him now.
Week 1 against Drake May, if he comes out and plays an amazing game and they win that, will that pique your interest?
I will say he finished off last season really well.
Yep.
He showed what he can be. Like that Tennessee game, the third last game I think it was, they scored 60-plus points and he had 6 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And 400-plus passing yards.
Yeah, it was awesome.
He showed what he can do, but it's not often that you see it. So,
and then on the flip side of that, anytime they play Georgia, they just get the absolute smackdown on them. So, and that's kind of like the standard of like, hey, if you're going to go play in the NFL, you need to be able to do this. Again, tough schedule. If they come out of this 6-6, that'll be impressive. But if he really is going to be sort of like that first round quarterback, South Carolina need to be one of those elite teams. So that's what I'm really watching for with Spencer Rattler. Couple of other guys, real quick, we'll get to the end of the show. Sam Hartman, who you talked about as well. I was going to talk about Cam Rising as like my sneaky guy that I really want to watch, but Sam Hartman, if you were a betting person and you bet a lot of money on Wake Forest, he won you a lot of money because he was key in getting them plenty of covers and making them actually a competitive team, even though they did lose a few games there. But now that he's at Notre Dame, I'm very excited for that. They've got extremely high expectations, especially considering the start that Notre Dame got off to last season when they were getting blown out by non-FBS teams. Carson Beck for Georgia. If they can get a real-life human quarterback who is not Stenson Bennett, they might just be on another god tier compared to every other team.
Yeah, I think they're just going to keep rolling this year.
Yeah, they won't slow it down at all. Kyle McCord, I'm interested to see only because I'm a huge Ohio State guy. I really loved Dwayne Haskins, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud. Was it TJ Barrett before?
JT Barrett, yeah.
JT Barrett, sorry, yeah. Even before, so Kyle McCord looks like he's in line. Now, he's not secured the job, but he is in line for it. Frank Harris at UTSA. I'm excited to watch UTSA. I think they're going to be a sneaky, really good team this season. DJ Uiagalelei. I can say it. I just can't say it when I'm talking into a microphone. As embarrassing that is. I'm going to have to edit over the top of this. Will Rogers at Mississippi State will be really interesting because I believe this is definitely his last season there. Devin Leary from Kentucky taking over from Will Levis. touted to be better than Will Levis. We talked about JJ McCarthy, and even Joe Milton at Tennessee is incredibly polarizing. Definitely got one of the best arms.
I was about to ask you about him.
I don't really rate him at all, but I know that he's a fierce competitor.
I think he's already 24 years old now, and he's only just coming in where he's expected to be the starter of season. Like I don't know, that Tennessee offense. I'm a fan of watching it, but as far as projecting to NFL, I've never been a fan of it, and it's why I had trouble with Hendon Hooker projected to the NFL, and same with Jalen Hyatt as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Joe Milton has the potential to have a massive season, but I just don't see him being an NFL caliber quarterback.
People love him. Sorry, go.
No. You were saying like he's going to be 24 years old. He's a young whippersnapper. Hendon Hooker was 47 last year, wasn't he?
And this is the issue we're having as well the last few years is
we're getting over the COVID hump.
Because of COVID,
yeah,
it's pushing the age of people back, and the NIL deals have come in as well.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to change our mindset a bit as far as the age of players coming into the drafts. But when you get to 24 years old and you haven't really shown a lot in college up to this point, it's kind of hard to project them what they'll do at the NFL level.
For sure. And people love Joe Milton because he's 6'5", 245 pounds. Like, he's a huge guy. He's got an absolute cannon for an arm. He can definitely throw the ball further than anyone else. But everywhere he's gone, he was at Michigan. He got beaten by Shea Patterson. He went to Tennessee. He started there. Didn't last long. He got beaten out by Hendon Hooker. Now they're going to give him the keys. Tennessee will be an interesting team to watch this season. And then, of course, I'll just quickly go through anyone that we didn't really mention here. I'm looking at my super deep list, like Jaden Daniels at LSU could be interesting. Jalen Daniels at Kansas. Looking at Riley Leonard at Duke could be kind of interesting. There's some other people on this list that I didn't get to. Dillon Gabriel with the Sooners might be interesting to see how he performs as well. Talked about Quinn Ewers. Brennan Armstrong at NC State could be kind of interesting to watch as well. Cade McNamara, now that he's at Iowa, maybe he gets him better. Gunnar Watson at Troy. I think that is everyone. We did it.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, there's about 40 people that I could list off that we could talk about.
But there's only a certain amount that are going to look at like NFL prospects. So
yeah,
John's top 10 quarterbacks are the 133 starting quarterbacks in FBS in college football. And
Taulia Tagovailoa as well. Can't believe I missed him at Maryland. He should be really cool to watch as well. I'm excited. Won't be as good as Tua, I don't think, but as his brother. So that's it. That's the show for today for quarterbacks. Next week, we're going to be doing running backs. That will be definitely a shorter show because from what I've seen so far, the running back class doesn't exactly pop off the page outside of guys that I even mentioned in this episode as well. That's going to do it. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your weekend ahead. Brad, Dan, appreciate you as always. We'll catch you next week.